Dozens of soldiers killed, civilian casualties. Blood has already begun to flow from Russia's attack on Ukraine. Bombs are exploding in several cities, and Russian troops are advancing on several fronts. President Putin has vowed to stop anyone who tries to interfere.
While countless people are fleeing for their lives, Ukraine's military force is fighting back, and President Zelensky is calling for citizens to take up arms. CBN's Brody reports on the outbreak of war in Ukraine.
War sirens wailing in Kyiv before dawn, followed by early morning explosions in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city. Explosions reported near Kyiv and other cities across Ukraine as Russia targeted key infrastructure, military air bases, and air defense systems. The bombing sent Ukrainians scrambling for safety. These scenes are from the port city of Mariupol, people lining up at ATMs and packing up their cars. In Kyiv, the capital, traffic backing up as far as the eye can see. Overnight, President Putin announced the beginning of Russian military operations in Ukraine, disguising his full-scale invasion as a mission to support Russian rebels in the Donbass region of Luhansk and Donetsk, land he claims belongs to Russia. Now a doorway for Russian troops into Ukrainian territory.
It won't be bloodless. There will be suffering, there will be sacrifice.
Ukraine's foreign ministry says they've landed in the southern port of Odessa, crossing into Kharkiv. This security footage shows Russian military crossing into Ukraine from Crimea, the peninsula seized by Russia in 2014. Ukrainian forces are fighting back in Donbass, as well as regions in the north and south. Dozens of soldiers reported dead so far, as well as civilian casualties. President Zelensky calling on Ukrainians to rise up and fight the invaders in the cities and town squares, encouraging citizens to take up arms. The country's UN ambassador delivering this message to Russia at last night's Security Council meeting.
There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell. Ambassador.
Meanwhile, the world community is responding with promise of sanctions, but no military aid.
We are banding together in strong terms to condemn these outrageous acts in the strongest possible terms.
President Biden issuing a statement last night saying, quote, Russia alone is responsible for the death and destruction this attack will bring, and the United States and its allies and partners will respond in a united and decisive way. The world will hold Russia accountable. The president is expected to address the nation at noon today and announce crippling economic sanctions against Russia. The White House has been very clear it will not send troops into Ukraine, even to rescue Americans. However, U.S. troops are on the border with Poland and ready to help those fleeing from Ukraine. Brody, CBN News.
Well, George Thomas joins us now from Ukraine. So, George, tell us what's going on there. Thousands are fleeing the invasion. They're heading your direction. How are you preparing, and how's the city preparing for the humanitarian crisis?
Yeah, I woke up early this morning as soon as I heard that Russia had invaded, and pretty much went to the streets, and there were long lines, Gordon, at the banks, at pharmacies, at grocery stores. People were walking very fast. Some were running. You could just sense the panic, the fear. They were all on their phones. And then obviously they realized that a sea of humanity is going to be heading their way. Local authorities here are expecting close to about 5 million people. Today, the mayor of the city of Lviv here, the largest city in the western part of the country, showed a website and a map showing about 6,000 shelters that have opened up. They've been preparing for this for the last eight years. Area churches, synagogues. I was at the largest synagogue in Lviv yesterday, and they were already feeding families that had escaped from Kyiv as well as from the eastern part of the country. So Lviv, they call the city of Lion. And so they love to welcome tourists, but they have said to me repeatedly, if the Russian bear comes, this lion will rise up. But these folks here in the city are ready to receive the sea of humanity coming their way.
How much territory do you think Russia is trying to take right now?
Yeah, if you look at a map of Ukraine, remember, Gordon, you know this, Ukraine is the largest city in Europe outside of Russia. But if you look at a map of Ukraine, you have the Dnieper River, which is Europe's fourth largest river, that basically cuts the country in half, right? It flows from north to south all the way to the Black Sea. Kyiv is smack dab in the middle. My sense is that in these opening hours, opening days, Russia is going to look at basically to divide this entire country in half. Everything to the east of the Dnieper River, that's their goal, is to basically cut the country in half. The reports are that Russian troops have easily rolled their tanks right across the Crimean bridge. They've easily come from the north, from Belarus. Where the struggle is right now, my understanding is that just before we came on the air, they have not managed yet to cross what's called the line of contact in the east, basically where the war has been raging for the last 8 years. So Ukrainian forces have dug in. So far, Russians have not managed to cross that line of contact. But the picture you have here, Gordon, is sort of a choke point, and the Ukrainians are, in essence, surrounded on all sides.
Well, Russia's now claiming that they've completely destroyed the Ukrainian air defenses. So what do you think the Ukrainians want to see from NATO?
The moment the bombs started dropping, I have a very close contact in Mariupol, which is the largest port city for Ukraine, and obviously it would be a prized possession for the Russians if they were to manage to capture it. I got on the phone with him this morning. While we were talking, I also had a chance to pray with him. He's a very significant, influential pastor in the region. And I said, what can we do? He says, George, we're tired of this talk of sanctions. We're tired about NATO coming together, the alliance, everybody's together. The reality is that, George, what we need to see 100, 200 United States aircraft, fighter jets, NATO fighter jets hovering over the nation of Ukraine. He said, like that, Russia will stop. He says Russia now realizes that the United States and NATO, they are not going to put troops on the ground here in his country, and he knows, Vladimir Putin knows that and is taking advantage of that.
Well, let's take a look at a larger map to show the NATO countries that are surrounding Ukraine.
Yeah.
If NATO fighter jets, if U.S. fighter jets get involved, I mean, there's a huge risk of this turning into World War III. Is that understood on the ground in Ukraine? And it just looks like they're just trying to completely annex Ukraine and bring it back into some kind of Russian Federation.
Oh, Gordon, that is absolutely what Vladimir Putin wants. And he has telegraphed it to the entire world. He said that I want to denazify Ukraine, this idea that Ukraine is filled with Nazis. And it was actually a Nazi coup that overthrew the regime of Viktor Yanukovych 8 years ago. And in fact, this past weekend at the Munich conference in Germany, Ukraine's President Zelensky, in effect, said to the rest of the world, listen, guys, we have for the last 8 years been a shield against the army, against the rest of Europe and NATO. The reality is that if Russia does manage to gobble up this entire country, look at that map, they will be on the doorsteps of Poland, Hungary, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, and in combination with Belarus has about 48,000 troops. Combine those two countries and Russia taking over Ukraine, you will have Russia at the doorstep of NATO. And so you ask the question about, this could be a World War III, absolutely catastrophic. Ukrainians will say, we are an independent country. We are democratic. We have enjoyed freedom for the last 30 years. What is worth dying for? That is what they're worth. That is what that they're willing to die for in order to keep this liberty. They say it's between freedom and tyranny. They don't want to live under a dictatorial regime.
All right. Well, George, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have some evacuation plans. George Thomas reporting from Lee.